Sivabalan Subramaniam our conversation by speaking to lawyer Yohendra Nadarajan edict. Yohendra, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Now,
good evening, Melissa.
Data in Malaysia in all aspects seems to be a bit of an issue, but in particular for custodial deaths, not a lot of data, particularly disaggregated data, is known. So I'm wondering whether you have a better sense of the extent of the problem of custodial deaths in Malaysia, not just in terms of how many deaths, Yohendra, but also in terms of patterns of how these deaths occur.
Okay, basically getting information about that in custody has always been an issue in Malaysia. And the last time we had statistics with regards to that in custody was in 2018, whereby the Home Minister, in a reply to YB Kasturi Pato on 30th July 2018, said that there were 140 deaths from 2008 to 2018. In the span of 10 years, there was 140 deaths, whereby 22 were foreigners, 34 were Indians, which is 24%, foreigners were 15%, Chinese were 28 persons, which is 20%, whereas Malays actually are the most, which is 53 persons, which comes up to close to 38%. That's in custody, in police custody. As far as that in custody for jail is concerned, there was for the year 2013 to 2017, again, an answer in Parliament by the Home Minister. He said that 1,293 persons had died, whereby 55% were actually Malays, 16% were Chinese, 13% were Indians, and 12% were foreigners. So basically, we can see that that in custody doesn't necessarily mean just the police, but it also means somebody who dies in mental hospital or in prison, and that numbers are quite shocking, because nobody should actually die, especially when it comes to being held in lockup. When somebody walks into a police station, why is there a need for them to come out in a body bag? So that,
can I, if I could
yes,
just sort of jump in there. So,
sure.
In any number of cases, we've had the police explain that the person was sick, for instance, or had a heart attack. I mean, people do die of all kinds of reasons. In terms of the cause of death, whether it was suspicious circumstances, the result of abuse potentially, or it was natural causes like a disease, how do you begin to disaggregate the numbers in terms of causes?
Okay, as far as causes, also most of the time when it's reported in Parliament, most of the time it's natural death, health reasons, heart attacks, pneumonia, AIDS, those kind of things are reported. But actually, when you go into the crux of the matter, when you do a proper investigation, then you find out that sometimes there are more than meets the eye, and most of the time, only when somebody does an inquiry into the deaths of a person in custody, then you actually get to find the causes of death.
Right. To what extent, Yohendra, sorry, if I can just jump in very quickly. To what extent are those inquiries driven by families? That if families report, if families complain, then you'll have an investigation. If families don't, or who passively accept the fact of the death of their loved ones, then you don't have an investigation.
Okay, let's come back to the law. How an inquiry is made. Basically, Chapter 32 of the Criminal Procedure Code, which is actually sections 328 to 341A of the Criminal Procedure Code, it sets out inquiries into death. And basically, Section 328 defines causes of death. And actually, the CPC, the Section 334 mandates any person who dies in police custody, mental hospital, or prison, any such information of such death must be intimated to the nearest magistrate. So, by law, actually, when somebody dies in custody, doesn't matter if it's police custody, mental hospital, asylum, or prison, such information must be brought to the nearest magistrate. But now, it is the coroner's court which is presided by a sessions court judge. So it's mandatory to hold an inquiry into a death, especially if it's in police custody.
Right. But are there limitations to that, Yohendra, in terms of the coroner's court? Okay.
Basically, the problem is whether the coroners conduct their and hold their inquiry or not. That's another matter. But for us, as EDIC, a watchdog NGO, we try to monitor and see that every case which is brought to our attention, it is, and we will pursue the matter and to ensure that an inquiry or an inquest be carried out at the coroner's court.
Sometimes, can I just ask a quick follow-up about something you said? So you did say that you gave us a breakdown, as per the answer in Parliament, a breakdown of the number, the ethnicities of the persons who have died in custody. And in terms of absolute numbers, Malays seem to make up the highest number of custodial deaths. But I'm wondering, in terms of percentage, whether ethnic Indians and foreigners are disproportionately represented in terms of the number of deaths in custody. 24% of Indians within the time frame that you mentioned. Is there does race matter when looking at the disaggregated data of custodial deaths?
I don't think race matters, because whatever happens, it's an individual's life that has been taken. So it doesn't matter if he's Indian, he's Chinese, he's Malay. We are all Malaysians. It doesn't matter that somebody has died, somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's father, somebody has died in police custody. So race for me doesn't matter. It's a Malaysian problem. All Malaysians should stand up and voice out against this injustice.
Yeah, but Yohendra, I think the question is more to the question is really suggesting, is there an underlying problem of racism or xenophobia that leads to somebody who's either a foreigner, non-citizen, or an ethnic Indian Malaysian to be more likely to be mishandled or abused in a custody, therefore resulting in these higher numbers? I mean, I think that is the thrust of the question.
I don't think so that certain people or certain race or ethnicity are being targeted. It so happens that those are the people who are basically from the lower strata of society, and they are the marginalized, and basically there is no conclusive proof that certain races are being targeted in that manner.
Right.
For as far as EDIC can say.
Right. So what does EDIC, from EDIC's perspective, what is justice for the victims and for their families? What does that look like? And when you're advocating on behalf of the families, what challenges have you found in your past experiences?
Basically, when we go through the inquest proceedings, that's when we try to get as much information to get relevant documents and evidence otherwise not given to the families in other cases. So an inquest is very, very important, that the families have a right to participate in the proceedings and to gain access. And this would be useful for the purposes of civil suit against any of the tortfeasors for damages. So later on, the family may bring an action against the perpetrators, alleged perpetrators for damages. And basically, that is how we find that having an inquest is a very important procedure and step to be taken when it comes to death in custody.
Yohendra, Klang MP Charles Santiago has called for the National Human Rights Commission and the Enforcement Agency Integrity Commission, EAIC, to take a lead in this investigation. I think he was referring specifically to Sivabalan Subramaniam. But can you tell us, have the police ever allowed Suhakam and EAIC to take the lead?
Okay, under the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia Act, Suhakam, Section 4 and Section 12, it says that Suhakam may inquire into such human rights infringement. And also the Enforcement Agency Integrity Agency, the EAIC, they are empowered to conduct their own investigations into any human rights infringement. But we feel that the law is very clear. The law is settled that only the Criminal Procedure Code, that an inquest should be held when somebody dies. So, I mean, there are other mechanisms, but we feel that the law should take its course under the Criminal Procedure Code.
Yohendra, are the police, open to being investigated under the law? I'm just wondering whether they participate willingly. They're quite open in terms of sharing and wanting to provide accountability for deaths that happen under their watch.
Okay, as we can see, usually the police will come out with a police statement when somebody dies in custody. But however, when you don't have an inquest, you don't have an inquiry process, then a lot of things are being swept under the rug. And only during an inquest where you get to inquire how certain things has happened, only then we can ascertain what is the cause of death, and who might be the person who are criminally concerned in the cause of death of a person. So this is why a coroner is very important. A coroner's court is very important, because the coroner needs to inquire how and in what manner that the deceased came to his death.
Yohendra, in your own experience, has an inquiry ever led to reforms within a particular precinct, within a particular institution? Say if the cause was medical negligence, if that was the thing. Have you seen any positive change coming out of these things, apart from the ability of the victims and their families to sue for compensation?
To be honest, there are cases during inquests and during civil proceedings where the court has found negligence on the part of police. Later on, we find that such police officers actually been promoted and so forth. So we don't see any stern actions being taken against the perpetrators or the officers involved in custodial deaths. Unfortunately, that is what we have seen so far. And that is why, yes.
Yes. Oh, sorry. You please finish your thoughts.
Okay, because I was saying that the IPCMC, the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission, should be set up to investigate cases of this kind of cases of abuses or misconduct by the police. So that's why the IPCMC is very important.
Completely agreed. And we're going to be talking about the IPCMC in just a few minutes. Yohendra, first, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and we appreciate your time and your insights. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but more on this topic in just a couple of minutes, so stay tuned.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan dan maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada Islam. Orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan dan maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada Islam. Orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat.
Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our look at why deaths in custody or after being held in police custody continue to persist. Attempts to make the police force more accountable and to reduce incidents of abuse have had a checkered history, beginning perhaps with the Royal Commission of Inquiry 2 decades ago and a short-lived revival under the 22-month Pakatan Harapan government. What prospects are there for reform of police custody practices now? Let's speak to Ding Joanne, an advisor for the Centre for Independent Journalism. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight, Joanne. Now, basic question, why do you think this problem of custodial deaths persist? A basic question, but I'm sure one that's very complex to answer.
Yes, there are probably many reasons why custodial deaths still persist until today, despite decades and decades of us struggling with this issue. But I'm very sure that one that has definitely contributed has been a persistent lack of accountability for custodial deaths, which involve use of excessive force or perhaps negligence. Very few police officers have been charged in such cases, and even fewer convicted. I can only think of one police officer actually that was actually convicted and jailed for 3 years for causing hurt in relation to the death of A. Kugan in 2009. Even when the EAIC has unequivocally held following a public inquiry that the police were responsible for the death of a detainee, such as in the case of Damendran and Said Azlan, the police officers in question were charged but were ultimately acquitted. And the EAIC also found that police officers had hidden and even fabricated evidence in relation to those deaths. But because police disciplinary inquiries are not public, we have no idea whether any officers involved in these actions were disciplined. This is not a new issue. It has plagued us through decades. And yet, barring Pakatan Harapan's brief moment in governance, there seems to be a persistent lack of political will on the part of so many successive governments to seriously tackle this issue of police accountability. And now, even after the public outcry over the deaths of A.Ganapathy and S. Sivabalan, there has been hardly any response from our government ministers. To be honest, I couldn't find any. Perhaps there are, but I could not find any. So it is up to the public, therefore, to demand for accountability on this issue so that our leaders will be compelled to act decisively to address this important issue of police accountability.
So, you point to this really serious problem. I think human rights advocates all around the world note of impunity, the ability for those who violate the rights of others to go, unpunished. And that seems to be, in fact, an incentive to continue those practices. The flip side of that, of course, is this rhetoric we hear from the authorities that they are systematically weeding out the bad hats and dealing with rogue elements in their force. I mean, where do you place the police stated commitment to get rid of these so-called rogue elements versus the problem of systematic impunity?
Well, like I said, despite what the police have said, there has been very, very few instances of police officers being charged in relation to deaths. These are serious deaths. I mean, in the case of Damendran, he was found to have massive wounds on his body, internal injuries, and staples in his ears. I mean, A. Kugan had V-shaped burn wounds on his back, most likely caused by an iron. These are not minor offences. These are very serious human rights violations that have involved the loss of lives. So for these kinds of instances, there needs to be public accountability. We need to see what is being done, and there needs to be transparency in the process. In many other jurisdictions, there are non-police members involved in these proceedings. In the UK, a non-police member actually chairs the disciplinary board. So no longer is it the case where police officers have complete control over the disciplinary proceedings and where it is closed and nobody knows anything about it. That is not consistent with public accountability, and it is not consistent with building trust in the institution of the police. If we cannot see what is going on, and we can only see that nothing has happened, for example, or very little has happened, then it is only natural for the public to question what actually is being done.
Well, on that note, I'm just wondering about how far the public can question, because I'm drawn to something you said a little bit earlier about how, you know, there seems to be no political will for reform. And so it's up to us, the public, to keep pushing this matter to the forefront, and the role of the media to highlight these cases and keep them in the headlines. And I'm wondering about your views on the police investigations into media reporting on the deaths in custody, bringing people under investigation for commenting or questioning deaths in custody. What do you think about that?
I am very, very concerned actually to hear that journalists especially have been called up for the reports that they have made about these deaths in custody and comments that have been made, or calling up opposition MP Syed Saddiq, for example. The police wield tremendous power in the state. They can stop, search, arrest, investigate, interrogate. When a person is taken into custody, into police custody, they are entirely in the police's hands. They cannot choose to leave to see a doctor if they feel unwell. They cannot go home and get their medicine. They have to wear what the police provide. They have to eat what the police provide. Everything is in the police's hands. The only reason society allows the police to have this kind of power over the public is because they are limited by what the law allows them to do. There are checks and balances on that power. And one of the most important checks and balance to police power or any authority's power is the freedom of expression and the freedom of the media, that the media can report on abuses of power if and when they should occur. So if the press are not allowed to do their job, then our very fabric of society is being challenged. The press must not be intimidated for reporting without fear or favor on allegations of any abuse of power, whether it be by the police or by anyone in authority.
Well, thank you very much for supporting our work. I do want to ask you about that, those 22 months during the Pakatan Harapan administration where there was some movement. Could you give us briefly a sense of what happened and who was resisting change at that point in time, and are they in power now?
Well, in those 22 months, the Pakatan Harapan did try pretty hard to pass the IPCMC bill, and they did come up with a bill which, although not perfect, but accepted by those that they had consulted, and they consulted widely with the police, with civil society, with stakeholders, with families of victims, with lawyers, and they did try very hard. So the signal from the top was very clear. They wanted to pass the IPCMC. Of course, there were concerns from the police, and when we were all in the same room together, some of these concerns were valid. They were concerned about what exactly would come under the IPCMC's purview. What about anonymous complaints? Would they be subject to anything and everything under the sun? And these concerns, as far as possible, were addressed. So it shows that it was possible, actually, despite the political hot potato that this IPCMC is, to get to the cusp of passing this bill and starting this process of police accountability, of being able to call into account serious police misconduct and to see, for the public to see police officers being disciplined when they do conduct serious abuses of power. So I think it was possible, and yes, and I hope it will be possible again.
But But from the IPCMC, it became the IPCC, which is the Independent Police Conduct Commission Bill. And I'm just wondering whether, according to some commentators, they're saying that that particular bill lacks the bite of the IPCMC. What do you think, Joanne?
Are you referring to the last year's bill under Perikatan Nasional?
Yes.
So that is far inferior to anything that has been put forward so far, and far inferior to the current system we have of the EAIC. So the IPCC has even less investigative powers, no disciplinary powers, less independence, and all kinds of loopholes for the police to avoid answering questions should they choose to do so. So from that bill, I can see that our government is in effect not interested in pushing forward for the IPCMC and doing what it takes to set up a commission that will properly address the issue of police accountability with transparency. So I would say I hope that the IPCC bill is put to bed and we do not see it again, because it is not the answer to whatever it is that we are still facing today.
Joanne, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Appreciate your time. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. But before we leave you tonight, a reminder that you can get all the latest news on COVID-19 vaccines at astroawani.com and the Astro Awani app. Thank you so much for watching the show tonight. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
We'll be back with you same time tomorrow. Till then, good night.
Good night.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan dan maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada orang yang membuat